Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be going through some Unit 1 practice multiple choice questions for AP Human Geography. I have a practice test in the description down below for this video. So if you want to go and do some of these questions beforehand, go right ahead. We're actually going to go through all the questions. I'm going to explain the answer choices, explain why the right answer is the right answer, and why the wrong answers are the wrong answers, and give you some test taking skills and strategies that'll benefit you for the AP exam and for your class. Let's jump right into this. So the very first question here, we're given a map. A lot of these Unit 1 questions are just about reading maps or identifying what type of map you're being shown, because Unit 1's really to set you up for the rest of the course, because you're going to be using your skills from Unit 1 in every other unit following. So let's get through this. MCQ number 1, what type of map is shown to demonstrate the number of electoral votes in each state? So this map actually shows two different things. It shows party affiliation and it shows electoral vote. So it gives us some qualitative data and quantitative data. The quantitative data is the electoral votes. The qualitative data is the party affiliation here. And this question is specifically asking about the electoral votes. And we know that in states with the most electoral votes are going to be California, Texas, Florida, New York. They have the highest populations here. And we can see that here on the map. The states with the highest populations, the states with the highest number of electoral votes are going to appear bigger. So states like California, Texas, Florida, we can see Washington and Illinois, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York. They have more people living in them, so they're going to have higher electoral votes. They're going to be bigger in size. So what type of map varies the size of entities based off of the data? In this case, population. The increased population, increased size. That's going to be a cartogram. Some people here may have said choropleth or proportional symbol, and they're looking at the party affiliation, and we're looking at the electoral votes for this specific question. MCQ number 2, which region has a cluster of similar quantities of obese people per state? So this map also shows two different values. It shows the percentage of the state that is obese, and it shows the quantity, the numerical value of obese people. Some states have close to 10 million people. Some states have close to a million, or even 100,000 if they have more healthier people living in the state here. And this question particularly is asking about the similar quantities, the number of people. So we're going to ignore the shading on the map. I know it can be very hard to ignore the shading because the shading is really thrown at you, but we're going to be looking at the size of the states again. Let's just like for the first question, we're looking at a cartogram in this case again. So we're just going to be reading a map. That's all this question is. It's a little bit more of a complicated question than something I would expect you to see on the AP exam, but nevertheless, it's still beneficial practice. So answer choice A, southwestern United States. So we see similar quantities, similar sizes of obese people here. And we know that these are all vernacular regions. So it's going to vary depending on, who's looking at this, what states considered southwestern United States, what states are considered southeastern, but we're just going to use some general context here. Let's consider this to be southwestern here. So do we have similar sizes across all of the states here? Sort of. I don't think we would give this the best answer just right off the bat. Let's look at some other answer choices. Some people would also include Texas in this. So that's something to also consider. If we include Texas in it, I would say no, definitely not. But if we don't include Texas, I would still lean towards no, just because California is such a big exception to this. So let's rule out A for now. Let's go to B, northeastern United States. Let's go here. Pennsylvania is actually in the northeastern. They just had to include it somewhere. And I would say definitely not. This is even a worse answer than southwestern United States. We see a lot more variation in the sizes of the states, so that's going to be incorrect. C, central southern United States. Let's include these states here. All right, would we say that this is a cluster of similar quantities? I would say almost all of these are pretty similar in size, so that's not a bad answer choice. So let's come back to that one. Let's look at D, central northern United States. So we'll include Wyoming in this, all the way over here. Lots of variation here, just like for the Northeast. I would say this is an incorrect answer choice as well. And then we have the southeastern United States. We'll include West Virginia, just for the sake of it. I would say that this is a better answer. I would say that's better than A, but not as good as C here. I would think that West Virginia and South Carolina, Kentucky, compared to Florida or Georgia, those are a lot more different in size, and it may not appear that way, but we're actually decreasing in size the further north we get. Each state, the further north we get, is getting smaller in size. And it's kind of like a little perceptual effect. Kentucky, if you look at it, it may look very similar to North Carolina or even Florida, but it's not. It's a lot smaller. So I don't think Southeastern United States is the best answer here. If Central Southern United States wasn't a good answer, I would say pick Southeastern, but Central Southeastern is an answer choice. That's going to make it the right answer. And the star is just kind of in the middle of B and C. It's going to C. Perfect. All right, MCQ 3, which of the following is preserved on this projection? We're given the Gauss-Peter projection. If they ask you a question on the AP exam about a specific projection, they're going to provide you that projection. So there's no need in memorizing any of these projections. There are hundreds of them. And yes, we have some common ones like the Mercator, the Robinson, the Gauss-Peter projection, but don't bother memorizing those. That's just a waste of space. Pay more attention to more important concepts for the course. So let's just look at it and see, okay, what is distorted? What is preserved? So let's go through A, size. The size of the countries, we don't see what is it? Not the opposite of compression, expansion. Closer to the poles, like we see for a lot of projections, like the Mercator projection, everything seems pretty good. Africa looks pretty big, as it should be. Greenland looks pretty small, as it should be. So I would say that size is preserved. Now, what about the shape? I'm looking at this and I see that Greenland kind of looks pretty compressed. We see some other land masses that look a little bit expanded here, a little bit stretched out. So I don't think shape is preserved. I think it's distorted. It could be worse, but it definitely is distorted, and it's very obvious that it is distorted. Now, what about angle? That's a pretty important one here. We actually brought E as well because it has shape in it. But what about angle? Is angle distorted? Well, we're actually given a grid. And if we're given a grid like this, we can probably assume that it's showing us that angles can be adequately used and they are correct. So that's going to mean angle is correct as well. So that's going to make D the correct answer here. All right, moving on. What is true regarding spatial patterns in Mali? So we're just reading a map again, but we're also going to be connecting the data in the map to real world situations here, or real world concepts. And that's something that's very important for the AP exam. So this is a great question. So we're given the population density, not the population numbers, but the population density, the number of people in this case per squared kilometers. We talk about this more in Unit 2, but you still have to be able to read a map. So that's where those Unit 1 skills come in here. And just by reading the map and not looking at any answer choices, we can see that the population density is very high in western and southern, or we can say southwestern regions of Mali. So we're going to use that to answer the questions here. So what is true regarding spatial patterns? A, there is no urban or suburban developments found in eastern or northern Mali, and that cannot be determined. We have no information regarding urban patterns or suburban patterns in this country. We can probably assume that there's no suburban developments just yet, but there's probably some urban developments. We don't know for sure if they're in eastern or northern Mali. We don't know that for sure. So let's not pick that one. B, northern Mali is agriculture based, while southern Mali comprises of dominating urban hubs. We can predict that, but we're also not given any information about the economies. We're not given any information about how the land is being used. So that's not a good answer as well. That cannot be determined. C, population densities fluctuate throughout eastern Mali, but are lower compared to central Mali. I would say that the lower part is true for the most part, but I don't think it really fluctuates, or at least it doesn't fluctuate that much, because we can see that consistent shading here in eastern Mali. And even if we include this in here, for the most part, it's pretty consistent shading. So I don't think it really fluctuates that much. So I would rule out C. D, there is a cluster of population in western Mali. That is true. There is a cluster of population here in western Mali, but it's greater than that of southern Mali. The shading in southern Mali is definitely darker, so the population density is higher in southern Mali. So that's going to be incorrect as well. E, population density is relatively uniform across northern Mali and most of eastern Mali, and that is correct as well. We see that consistent shading in northern Mali for most part is just the same shading, so the same population density, and for most of eastern Mali as well. So that's going to make E the correct answer here. Question 5, which is always referenced when using a GPS, a global positioning system here. And the College Board likes to use the big terms: global positioning system, geographic information system, satellite navigation system. When you're thinking of these, just think of the abbreviation. Think of GPS. What do you use a GPS for? You use it for travel. You use it to locate where you are, where your parents or family members are located on Live 360. GPS. You're using the absolute location because you want to know where exactly they're located. Number 6, what spatial technology is shown in the image above. This is a pretty simple diagram of a GIS, a Geographic Information System. This is a computer system that captures, stores, analyzes, and displays geographically referenced information or environmental data, and that enables users to visualize and understand spatial relationships and patterns on the Earth's surface. It's a great way to analyze this is to break it up into layers like it's done here in the image, and you can analyze or find trends of the different geographical information that exists in one place. And this is used in fields like urban planning, agriculture, healthcare, natural resource management, telecommunications, and transportation, and among others as well. MCQ 7, the maps show residential neighborhoods in the Republic of Singapore. This is a country. Which of the following individuals or organizations would be most likely to make a decision based on the spatial patterns shown on the map? So what type of spatial pattern are we looking at? Are we looking at economic data? Are we looking at political data? Are we looking at environmental data? Are we looking at cultural data? We're actually looking at cultural data. We're looking at ethnic compositions of different regions of Singapore. So who would use this type of data? A person planning to move from a more rural area to a more urban area within Singapore. Now, this is on the AP exam. There's a good reason of why you would rule out this answer choice. For one, you would probably learn that Singapore is 100% urbanized. There are no rural areas. It's 100% urbanized. So that would automatically rule out this answer choice. However, if you're still in Unit 1, you probably don't know that. So how do you rule this out? Well, this is not the best answer because usually someone moving somewhere, especially within a country, is going there for job opportunities. They're going to look for housing affordability. They're going to look at where the job opportunities are located. They're also going to look at crime rates. They're going to look at educational opportunities and so on. They may look at healthcare access as well, look at transportation. So ethnic composition, not very high priority for most people. And sometimes you got to be realistic in your response. And this doesn't seem like a good common sense answer choice, so we can rule it out. This class, a lot of the times, it's just common sense you didn't really think about before. And so you can use common sense to answer some of these questions. And that's what College Board wants you to do. B, a business analyzing demographic characteristics within its target market area. So this map shows demographic characteristics. It shows ethnic composition in different regions of Singapore here. And businesses, what's the goal of a business? To make the most profits. And some businesses do cater to certain ethnic groups, or certain ethnic groups buy their products more. And since the goal of a business is to maximize the profits, they want to be located in an environment with their target consumer demographic. So that's a good answer choice. Let's look at C now. An environmental advocacy group seeking to protect the habitat of vulnerable species. That's not correct because this map doesn't tell us anything about the environment or vulnerable species. D, a government agency seeking to withdraw economic or income inequalities across ethnicities. This map doesn't give any economic information. E is also incorrect because the map doesn't give any information on labor or land costs, so more economic information. So that's going to make B the correct answer here. 8, poverty rates at a national scale. So we're looking at an entire country. Let's say Canada for this question. Will be most likely used by which of the following organizations here. So I would approach this question and see, okay, which of these organizations or entities can be applied at a national scale or is used by a country as a whole? What could be used by Canada as a whole? Not any other country, not a specific part of Canada, but the entire country as a whole. So A, supranational organizations. These are organizations like the European Union, like NATO, like Mercosur, like UMSCA. There's a lot more, the African Union, the Arctic Council. There's a lot of supranational organizations. And one common characteristic between all these organizations is that they're comprised of different countries. They're international. They're not national. So that's going to make A incorrect. B, middle-aged citizens within towns. We're looking at local areas. We're not looking at a national scale, so that's going to rule that out. C, local retail businesses. It gives us local in the answer choice. That's not national. That's local. D, federal postal services. We could think of, in the United States Postal Service System. We could think of the Postal Service System in Canada. Those are applied federally, they're applied nationally, they're applied to the country as a whole, and they're usually run by the government. So D's a great answer here. E, university research teams. That's not a good answer as well. Usually universities are located in one spot, so they're going to be looking at local or regional, subnational, so below national entities. So that's going to make D the correct answer here. Number 9, which of the following maps would have the smallest scale? Smallest scale means the more geographic area we're looking at. And that means that our information is going to be less specific because we're looking at more space. So let's actually rank these entities in terms of increasing scale. So which here is going to have the highest scale here? Which is the most specific? We're going to be looking at counties, we're going to be about local areas or streets, and I would say here we're drawn between Atlanta and Leon County. Atlanta, we would say the Atlanta metropolitan area is probably comprised of multiple counties, so we would say that B is of a higher scale than A. I'm using my mouse for this. And then let's look at this. Gross domestic product per port in Alabama. So we're looking at a state, Alabama. We can look at the region. We can look at the southern region of Alabama. And then we have number of college students per Ivy League in the northeastern United States. That's a region comprised of multiple states. And then the United States is comprised of all the states. Of course, it's the United States. So we would say here that the Alabama answer choice is of a greater scale than the northeastern United States, because Alabama is one state as compared to multiple states that are found in northeastern United States. So northeastern United States is covering more geographic area, so that's going to be of a smaller scale. And then United States comprises of the most geographic area, so that's going to be the smallest scale, because we're going to get the least specific information of unemployment rate. If we looked at the unemployment rate of Georgia, we would get more specific information that would be of a larger scale. So that's going to make C the correct answer here. 10. Which of the following contributes the least to time-space compression here? When we're thinking of time-space compression, the first thing that you should be thinking about is both transportation and communication technologies. So let's use that to eliminate answer choices. A, aerospace transportation. That's transportation technology. This is also transportation technology. Boat travel gets you from place to place. Growth of social media services. That's communication technology. So now we're left with two answer choices, which is great. We want to be there. Rapidly expanding economic development, or the growing activity and role. We think of a synonym for role to be prevalence of tourism here. So which one's the correct answer? Well, economic development is a cause for time-space compression because it allows people to invest in the development of communication and transportation technologies. That's a good connection there. And then E, the growing activity and role of tourism. Tourism has existed before. It's existed for hundreds of years, but it's gotten easier as a result of time-space compression, as a result of transportation and communication technology. So it's an example of time-space compression, but not necessarily a cause. 11. Which of the following is the best example of absolute location? So when we think of absolute location, think of two things. Look at latitude and longitude, both have to be given, or an address, some kind of information that can pinpoint someone or something to a specific location. So A, 5 degrees north. This is more of a direction. It doesn't tell us where 5 degrees north. Are we looking west? Are we looking east? We can't really pinpoint someone in the world with just this information. B, 18 kilometers from Burbank, California. This is also a direction. It's a distance. It's not necessarily an absolute location, though, because we don't know where. Are we going 18 kilometers north, 18 kilometers south or southeast? We're not given that. C, we're given a specific address. This is a unique address. So we can pinpoint this location, and there's only one place like this in the entire world. So that's an absolute location. So C is the right answer. D, the prime meridian, that's not a location. And then E, Charleston, South Carolina. It's not very specific. It's over 100 square miles, has over 150,000 people in Charleston. So it's not an absolute location because we can't pinpoint where in Charleston or who in Charleston. If we had a specific business or a residential facility in Charleston with a street address or even a zip code, that would be a way better answer choice, but it's not. 12. Which of the following best identifies why an individual residing in South Carolina is more likely to immigrate somewhere else along the East Coast over the West Coast? And something that's coming to my mind is distance decay. You're more likely to travel short distances than long distance because you're more likely to travel short distances because you're more familiar with the area and there's less energy in going short distances. If I run a mile compared to 3 miles, it's shorter energy to run 1 mile. I'm not going to be as out of breath. It's not going to be as difficult to do. So let's go through all these. A, lack of transportation between coasts. We have in the modern world so much transportation options. We have cars, air travel, bus travel. It's very accessible. B, lower economic costs. we're not given any data on the cost of living on the east or west coast. Living on a coast is expensive. We also don't know if they're living on the coast or just in a state with a coastline. Like South Carolina is on a coastline, but they could be living in the western part of South Carolina, not necessarily on the coast. And we don't know about where they're going to move to on the west coast as well. They could just be moving to California, but maybe not necessarily on the coast. They're not moving to Malibu, for instance. C, time-space convergence. This is actually a trick answer choice, and it would be the correct answer choice if we were looking at the opposite question, why he would move to the west coast over the east coast, even though he already lives on the east coast. And this would be the right answer choice in that case because time-space convergence has made transportation easier than ever. It's so easy to travel long distances compared to the past. But that's not what the question's asking, so C is incorrect. D, high tourism on the west coast. Both coasts, because they're coasts, experience high rates of tourism. Tourism does exist. In South Carolina specifically, I'm thinking of Hilton Head, I'm thinking of Charleston, I'm thinking of Beaufort County. A lot of those areas of Charleston have tourism. Not Charleston, South Carolina have tourism. So that's not really a good answer choice here. E, increased familiarity with the East Coast human-environment interaction. And this kind of does sound like a nonsense answer, just because, one, it's a little longer compared to the rest of them, and it just sounds very complex, and it sounds like it's a tricky answer, but that's actually the right answer here. He's going to be more familiar with the culture, the economics, the geography, and the people of the East Coast as compared to the West Coast. And most people like familiarity. People like to be around people similar to them in terms of culture and history. And so that's a great reason for why someone's more likely to stay somewhere close compared to going somewhere further away. 13. Which of the following is the primary assumption of the environmental determinism concepts here? So it's basically just asking for a definition. So let's go through all of these. A, human population density is controlled by the cultural and physical environments. If we eliminated culture, this would be a right answer here, but it's not because cultural's in there. Environmental determinism doesn't include culture really anywhere in its definition. B, the physical environment has little influence on human interaction. That's incorrect. Environmental determinism says that the physical environment has a lot of influence on human interaction. C, humans have complete control over their physical environment and landscape. That is not true. It says that the environment has a lot of control over the environment and landscape. D, many human adaptations are possible with a specific physical environment. Environmental determinism goes against adaptations and says that the environment determines human interaction. And that's going to make E the correct answer here. The physical environment has the greatest impact on human cultural and traditions. And when you think of culture, you may think of language, you might think of religion, but culture has a lot to do with human environment interaction and how we use the landscape here. 14. The ability for snowboarding events to occur in Gatlinburg, Tennessee through the usage of artificial snow demonstrates what concept here? So why would you use artificial snow? You would use it in conditions where there's not precipitation or where there's not the cold temperatures necessary to naturally generate snow here. And so they're overcoming an environmental limitation here. So let's go through these answer choices here. If we're overcoming an environmental limitation here, that means the environment's not determining their activity. So that's not determinism. We're not talking about any type of resource usage here. And we're talking about possibilism. Yes, we're talking about possibilism. We're talking about overcoming an environmental limitation. Yes, the environment does determine certain parts of human environment interaction and human culture, but we're able to adapt to many environmental conditions here. So that's going to make possibilism the right answer here. Both of these, globalization and time-space compression, these are just nonsense answer choices. They have nothing to do with human environment interaction. 15. Which of the following is not an example of environmental possibilism? So it's asking, what's an example of environmental determinism here? What shows the environment is limiting human interaction or human culture here? So A, use of nitrogen-based fertilizers for commercial agriculture. We're overcoming an environmental setback with low soil fertility or some other poor growing conditions. So A is incorrect. The construction of canals. Canals allow for more accessible transportation that might not have been possible before. So that's incorrect. Drought, lowering seasonal crop yields. That shows an environmental limitation to human environment interaction that may have not been overcome or may not be able to become overcome. So C is a good answer choice here. D, boat travel across wetlands. That used to be very hard to navigate wetlands, and it still can be pretty difficult, but we've developed airboats that can easily travel across wetlands. So that's incorrect. E, building beach houses on stilts to avoid flooding damage. And what this means is that they're building beach houses higher. There's open space before you actually get to the first floor of the house, to account for any water that could come in through storms or hurricanes like we have here in Florida. So it's common on coastlines to see houses or businesses built on stilts so that the bottom floor is open space in case flooding occurs. A lot of times businesses use these as parking lots. So that's overcoming an environmental challenge. So let's make C the right answer here. 16. Which is one disadvantage of using the map to analyze geographic data? When asked a question like this on the AP exam, on both the MCQ or the FRQ, it has happened on the FRQ, it's almost always asking about a disadvantage of using this particular scale or this particular scale of analysis. And so that's what the question's asking here. A, it doesn't show dispersals of farming land across the United States. It does show that. It shows both clusters and dispersals. We can see dispersals in the New England region, in the northeastern region, or in the western region of the United States. So that's incorrect. It doesn't show the variation in farming land within the counties. That's true. We don't know where farming is prevalent in counties. We just know the counties as a whole that have a percentage of land area that is farm. But we don't know if it's evenly distributed across the counties. We don't know if there's any clusters or dispersals within the counties. So that's a disadvantage of using this county scale of analysis. So that's a good answer here. C, it doesn't show patterns in land usage between different regions. Yeah, that's exactly what this map shows. That's exactly what this map is showing here. We're looking at land usage and we can compare different regions through the clusters and dispersals. So that's going to make C incorrect. D, it doesn't show the effects of land usage on environmental conditions. That's just not the purpose of the map. It's not highlighting any environmental conditions, but it's looking at land usage by humans. E, it doesn't show the effects of time-space compressions on land usage. I really don't know how to explain it. Besides that, it's a nonsense answer. So B is the correct answer here. 17. What is the scale of analysis of the map here? So what are we comparing the data between? We're comparing the data between different countries. It's going to vary on a country by country basis. We're looking at the consumption of tomato products between different countries. So that's going to be a national scale of analysis. On an FRQ, country scale of analysis or national scale of analysis would be acceptable. Now, some students would have said continental, but that's the scale because we're looking at a continent of Europe, but a national scale of analysis because the data varies at a country by country basis. All right, 18, let's use those skills we developed in 17 to answer this question. So what's the scale of analysis of the map? Well, we're looking at GDP growth, and GDP per capita across different countries in Southeastern Asia. We're actually looking at a supranational organization here. My pen went away. Supranational organization, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. And we're looking at China regions and the countries. So that's very, very important here because we're not looking at different countries. We're looking at both regions and countries here. So that's going to rule out national because we're not specifically looking at countries. And yes, we're looking at a organization, a supranational organization, but we're looking at that as the scale, not the scale of analysis. The scale is supranational, but that's not the scale of analysis. Subnational, are we looking at data within all of the countries? No, we're only looking at data within the country of China. We don't have any of that data for Indonesia or the Philippines or Vietnam here. We only have that for China. So subnational is not a good answer here. What about regional? We could say regional is a good answer. We're looking at different regions within China. And yes, we are looking at different countries across the Southeast Asian region. However, we could say that countries are considered regions. Countries are formal regions. So that makes regional the correct answer here. And locals also ruled out for the same reason subnational is ruled out, because that's looking at data within the countries, like a city or a town. And we don't have that kind of information at this scale. 19, what type of region is being represented in the scale of the map? Well, we're given the regions. We're given China regions and the countries, the Association of Southeast Asian Countries here. And so that's a supranational organization. That's a formally drawn region. It's a organization. So these regions aren't going to vary per person. So they're not vernacular. And they're not revolved around a specific node, like a transportation network here. So it's going to make formal the correct answer here, because they're not up to interpretation. These are defined. They're clear boundaries that cannot be disputed. And on a question asking you the type of region, they're going to give you two other fake regions here that are nonsense answers. In this case, it's local and demarcated. These are just nonsense answers there to trick you. If there's a region question on the AP exam, it's either going to be vernacular, formal, or nodal region as the correct answer. 20. Which pairs of regions are classified as formal regions? Let's go through all these individually here. So Silicon Valley and the Sun Belt, both of these are vernacular regions because perceptions can vary over where the Sun Belt or Silicon Valley starts or ends. I would say the Sun Belt more than Silicon Valley. The Sun Belts can vary depending on who you're talking to or what organization you're working with here. So that's going to make A incorrect here. B, Welsh-speaking region of the UK and the Sahara Desert. Well, the Sahara Desert's a formal region. We know that because geographic areas, natural landscapes, those are going to be formal regions here. But what about the Welsh-speaking region of the UK? We can pinpoint where Welsh-speaking people are located and draw up boundaries. It's not up to interpretation. You can't say, oh, I think they speak Welsh here or they speak Welsh less here. No, that's not up to interpretation. You can actually measure that. So that's going to make B a good answer here. Both of these are formal regions here because we can draw boundaries that are not up to interpretation and they're not revolving around a specific node or a function. C, the Middle East and the Great Plains. Well, the Great Plains is a formal region. That's a natural landscape. It's a geographic feature. What about the Middle East? Well, the Middle East can vary depending on who you're talking to. It's a perceptual region. So that's going to make C incorrect here. D, the DC metro routes and the African Union. Well, the African Union, you can draw up boundaries based on what countries are in the African Union. So just like in the last question, when we did the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, that's a supranational organization, just like the African Union. So that's a formal region here. But what about the DC metro routes? Anytime that you think of transportation routes for a certain place and it's asking you for a region, think functional region, think nodal region, because the metro routes are all revolved around DC, but they're going to different places. So D is actually a functional region, not a formal region. E, the Rust Belt in New York, Chinatown. These belts, we looked at the Sun Belt earlier, but the Bible Belt, the Rust Belt, the Sun Belt, all of these belts are based off of economic, environmental, or cultural characteristics. They're not any type of fixed boundary, and so they're all perceptual regions here. So E is incorrect. Chinatown, that is a formal region because you can draw boundaries on where Chinatown starts and ends in New York. So that's going to make B the correct answer here. Now, the final question. The regions displayed in the maps are classified as what? We're just classifying two different regions here. So let's look at the top map. We're looking at the West, Midwest, Northeast, and Southern regions of the United States. Well, some people don't consider Florida to be part of the South, even though it's the southernmost state. Some people don't consider Oklahoma or Texas to be part of the South. Some people consider Texas to be part of the West. And so these can vary depending on who you're talking to. So these are perceptual regions or vernacular regions. So that rules out B, C, and E. Now, what about this bottom one here? We're looking at transportation routes again. And so I said in the last question, when you see transportation routes, think of functional regions. These transportation systems revolve around the center of Paris. The city itself is the node. So it's not a formal region. It's a nodal region. So that's going to make D the correct answer here. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. It really does help me out, and it costs $0. I have some free resources for you in the description down below if you'd like to use them. If you have any AP Human Geography related questions whatsoever, don't hesitate to leave a comment down below the video or send me a message on Discord. I'll see you guys in the next video, though. Adios.